My name's Joshua Creamer. I'm Kalkadoon and Wanyi, so I've got connections up around Lawn Hill in the Gulf of Carpentaria and Mount Isa. I've been practicing as a barrister now for 13 years and I've involved in the Commission for about 6 months. I've been appointed a Commissioner.
My name's Fleur Kingham. I'm the Chair of the Queensland Law Reform Commission, and that's a position I've held since April 2023. Before that I was a Commissioner. My background is that I've had quite a diverse judicial career. I've sat on a range of courts and tribunals doing all sorts of things, but my real area of specialty, I'd say, is planning and mining and environmental law.
Well, those specialties work really well with this mining lease review process, or the mining lease objections review process we've got coming up. Can you just tell us a little bit about that process and the Commission's role?
Okay. The role of the Commission, well, the task the Commission's been given is to make recommendations about a good process for participation by the community in decisions about mining, and that's the mining lease, but also environmental authorities. So it's called the mining objections process. Our task is to do some research, extensive consultation about the way the current system is working, and make recommendations to government on improvements to that process.
Are there any limitations or things the Commission can't do with respect to the review?
That's a good question. There are a couple of points I should make. Firstly is that we're looking at two very specific approvals, the mining lease and the environmental authority. Now, there are lots of other things that have to be granted for a mining project to proceed, like cultural heritage approvals, native title and the like. And whilst we will look at that, it's not within our brief to make recommendations to change any of those processes, but we do need to understand how the mining lease and the environmental authority interact with them. I think the other thing that's worth noting is that whilst we can make recommendations, we can't change the law. The Law Reform Commission is an advisory body. We make recommendations and then it's for government to decide.
Fleur, it's really important that all Queenslanders who are affected by this type of activity getting engaged with the Commission. How are we going to do that? What's the best way that people can be involved and have their say in the review process?
We've got a big consultation process coming up in the second half of this year. We'll kick that off with 2 consultation papers, a general consultation paper and then what I'm starting to call a supplementary paper. It's a special purpose consultation paper on First Nations people's interests in relation to mining and environmental approvals, because whilst I'm conscious that there have been a lot of submissions made to government over the years about the mining and environment process in the past, there's very little that's come from First Nations communities, and I want to ensure that we fix that with this review. And we will be going around the state to engage with all sorts of organisations, but particularly Indigenous communities that are now or are likely to be affected in the future by mining activities. What we want to do is to hear from people about their concerns, their ideas, how the process might be made better.
So the Law Reform Commission plays a really important part in law reform, obviously, in Queensland, and this is the first time there has been an independent review into this process. And so it's really important that we engage with all stakeholders, and as I say, particularly First Nations people. Now, we will be out on the ground having meetings in communities, and we'll be in contact with community groups and different organisations, but it's really important we get to hear from our First Nations people in Queensland.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And I think it's worth also mentioning the Commission's commitment to really enhancing our engagement with First Nations communities. And we've got a number of things that we've already put in place, or plans that are in operation. We've been out and about to a number of Indigenous or regional communities already. The appointment of our first First Nations Commissioner. We have developed a commitment about the way in which we will engage with First Nations peoples and communities, and we're establishing a reference group to help the Commission think about how we go about consultation with First Nations people. So we'll have a number of Indigenous lawyers, community members and judges on that group. And that's a really important part of our strategic plan. So for this review about the mining process, it's obviously critical that we engage with First Nations people, but it's critical for all of the work that the Commission does. And I'm really pleased that we're some way down that path, but we've got a way to go, and I'm looking to the community to work with us and to help us understand the way in which the laws are impacting on First Nations people.